right.
So now I'm ready. First of all, I have to say it's a great honor to talk to you in person.
Oh, thank you very much.
The first time in my career. So I'm working for 12 years in the industry, but never had the chance to talk to a lot British.
Excellent. Well, I hope this is the first of many opportunities.
Hope so too. So I've seen the new trailer or the video from the prototype of your game Shroud of the Avatar. So
Mhm.
what is the story behind this title?
Great. If you're familiar with my previous work in the Ultima series,
Hmm.
you know that my work in medieval fantasy role-playing games goes back literally to the beginning of gaming. In fact, even before the existence of personal computers, I was writing medieval fantasy games starting in the 1970s, the Ultima series through the 80s and 90s, and then finally the series kind of wrapped up with Ultima Online and Ultima 9 right at the turn of the century. And so now it's been almost 15 years since I have created a fantasy role-playing game. And that's, in my mind, long enough. So it was time for me to go back and rekindle, hopefully what the players will find is not only a vision for a game that harkens back to the very best features that I was evolving during the Ultima series, but also carries them, appropriately into the future with new, but not only tools and techniques, of course, as the technology's evolved, but I believe that the Ultima series in the past made many important markers to advance the state of the art of role-playing games, and I think I can do it again here with Shroud of the Avatar.
Great. So, shroud, what do you mean with this? So, I've read in the dictionary, does it mean it's like a sheet for dead bodies, or is the avatar covered by a mystery? Can you go into detail a bit?
What I really mean by that is that it's really a way to say, the king is dead, long live the king. It means, we while we've moved beyond the game and the world and the characters of the past, we're really moving now boldly into the future, and that's what it kind of generally means to me. But then more specifically, when we talk about the Shroud of the Avatar, that will be how that relates to the current story will be unfolded through the new game. And in fact, the new game, something you may not have been able to pick up on in the materials we sent you, is the Forsaken Virtues. That subtitle is the title of what you might consider Episode 1,
Mm.
where it's the beginning of what we hope is or intend to be a five-story arc. First one being Forsaken Virtues, the other four coming out in something like a yearly, once-a-year rhythm after that. All of which adds up to the Shroud of the Avatar, with Forsaken Virtues being the first piece.
Talking about the virtues, so they played a huge role in the old Ultima games. So, are the new virtues comparable in a way?
Well, the thing that I liked about creating games that had ethical parables within them, which I started with Ultima 4, and Ultima 4 through Ultima 7, I think, did a particularly good job on. Um, uh, to show is yes, that I think that that's a very powerful way to give social relevance or personal meaning to your play experience in a game. In contrast, if you look at what most people do with role-playing games, most solo player role-playing games, your job is just to go kill the bad guy. And the
Hmm.
bad guy is usually just waiting for you at the end. And what most players do during most role-playing games is they min-max their way to maximum power, which has nothing to do with acting like a hero. In fact, often they steal and they pillage and they plunder to become powerful to go kill the bad guy. And the bad guy's not usually doing anything in the world to be considered evil. And in fact, you, the player, are often perpetrating more evil than the bad guy who's doing nothing. And so I think those stories, that classic story, is fairly hollow. And so in the games that I like to create, and this will be true in Shroud of the Avatar as well, is the bad guys take action in the world. You'll see, right away in Shroud of the Avatar that the malevolent forces that are rising to power have a very specific plan and are executing it as they move through the world. Not only laying waste to certain areas, but in search of very specific results
Hmm.
that make them a worthy adversary to you and a worthy peril to the NPCs that live in the world. And similarly, you are going to be, not only judged based on how you perform the tasks that you've been asked to, but the methods by which you employ. And so, depending on if you are brave or compassionate, we will, judge you suitably.
So if I get you right, there's no huge bad guy adversary in the end, so there are other heroes you compete with, or did I got this wrong?
No, that wasn't exactly what I meant. In Shroud of the Avatar, we're introducing a new malevolent force in the new world, and so, but the nature of that malevolent force is a reveal that will go on through these 5 episodes. But the general sense of this evil, which will become clear even in the first episode, has to do with your first exposure to them is your exposure to their tactics, where when you come into the game, cities throughout the world are coming under siege by the forces of darkness. And your first task is to figure out who is this, who is behind this these attacks, and what are they trying to accomplish other than just being bad guys and killing people. They have a deeper purpose other than just being mean-spirited through these attacks, and that is the secret you're trying to uncover in the first game.
So the story unfolds while you play.
That's exactly right. In fact, that's something, again, if you look back at the there's sort of when people think of my earlier work, I think they could think of 2 major components. Ultimas 1 through 9 were story-driven solo player games. And Shroud of the Avatar is primarily a story-driven role-playing game for you, the individual person playing it. The other thing I'm well known for is Ultima Online, which was the first major MMO and sort of opened up the MMO genre. And so Shroud of the Avatar is not strictly speaking a solo player game, nor is it strictly speaking an MMO. It is primarily a story-driven solo player game. It feels like a solo player game to you, the player. However, the game, whenever you're online, the game also reaches out to a central server and downloads the current state of the persistent world. So other players who build houses or build shops or make other changes to the persistent world also affect your world. Similarly, we look around at other players. We go look for people that you already know or already have some reason to interact with, and we bring those people into your play space in an ad hoc fashion, not like an MMO where if 10,000 people all jump into Lord British's castle, you see all 10,000 people in Lord British's castle, because that's very difficult. A client server MMO comes with a great deal of technical and logistical baggage, and we really just didn't think that was important or useful for this new game. Instead, what we wanted to do is make sure that you got a chance to play with people you know and go to the movies with and go out to dinner with, and have some reason to have an ongoing interaction with. We think playing with your real friends is far more important than playing with 10,000 strangers. And so we do that real-time matchmaking during gameplay.
And what is the maximum of those groups or clans or guilds?
Well, we don't know exactly what the maximum at a time will be. It'll be measured in dozens. However, it won't be hundreds or thousands. It'll be tens. But I also be very careful not to describe it as a party or a guild or a clan, because it really happens ad hoc, meaning you don't have to say, I want to go on an adventure with you. If you and I are friends in the real world and we can figure it out because either you've told us who your friends are, or or you've given us access to your list of names on email or Google Plus or Facebook or wherever you've identified who your friends are, if you'll give us access to that information, we will then use that to where when we see one of your friends is playing the game, we'll be sure to tell you about their behavior. We'll tell you, hey, your friend just built a blacksmith shop over here in the city. Why don't you go check it out? Or your friend's nearby, and you'll see each other walking around on the map. And so if you see your friend go into an adventure, you can just follow them into the adventure. You don't
Yeah.
have to. You don't have to say, "I want to party with my friend." It
So
just happens.
you can hop in when you like in Diablo 3, where you could open the party and say, "Come on, people, let's play together."
It's even easier than that. You literally don't even open a party. There's no there the you don't have to open a piece of interface
Ah,
to
okay,
say I want to travel with that person.
cool.
You just see them and you follow them and it's automatic.
Okay. So this leads to my question. So mostly you're on your own, but you can have a group adventure. So the enemies, they are scaling up from the level of difficulty. So if more player take part of your adventures.
While I'm sure we will in some cases do some scaling, our current thinking is that we're actually going to make some obstacles in the game. Like for example, there might be a range of mountains that generally prevents you from traveling to a new region.
Hmm.
And if you are low level and trying to go through what you might consider the control point that gives you access to the other side,
Hmm.
if you are too low level to tackle that combat on your own and get through to the other side, that might be a time where you say, hey, hey, John, Bob, whoever you are, hey, why don't you come with me? Because even though I'm low level, I really would like to get past this barrier. So come with me and perhaps together we can take it on. And so that would imply we're not scaling the size or difficulty of the combat based on the group. Rather, you would either elect to bring friends to get through a barrier sooner, or you might have to wait till you become a little bit tougher before you can take it on yourself.
Hmm. So we've seen the map, and we've seen, of course, Britannia in the video. So you're moving not totally freely, but on hex fields. So it's a bit back to the roots.
Right.
Yeah, when you started Ultima in the 80s, you had squares instead of hex fields. So was it really intended that you said, okay, we have so many new designs seen in the last 10, 15 years, but let's have a bit of the old school RPG feeling again?
Absolutely. And in fact, we think by going to this 2-scale map, we can provide a better experience and a sooner experience to players. And what I mean by that is that if you do a monoscale world, it means you have to hire an army of developers to detail the world at 1-to-1 scale. And that also means that you as a player have to wander through the world at 1-to-1 scale, which
Hmm.
means travel times are very lengthy, and there's lots of what I'll call dead space between the points of interest.
Hmm.
And we thought in this case, by going back to the older school 2-scale world, that meant that travel times would be shortened. You'd get an overview of the what I call the strategic level of your activities easier. And it also means that for us as developers, we focus our efforts on detailing the points of interest, which
Hmm.
are the actual activities that are fun and engaging. It
Hmm.
also allows us to do things much more easily, like if out in the middle of a wilderness, we decide here would be an interesting place in the future for a new point of interest, we can just add it. And it just
Hmm.
becomes a one tile change to suddenly bring a wizard's tower up out in the middle of the woods. So in real time, while the game is live, it's very easy for us to add new islands, add new points of interest, add new scenarios, add new player housing towns and cities and villages, whatever we might want to add. It's much easier in this model than in a monoscale world.
By the way, will you sell the game in a regular way or in the typical manner in stores and paying 40 or 50 bucks for it? Or is it like a download game, or is it free to play?
It's a digital download, and so the initial version of the game. For the people who participate in the Kickstarter campaign, they'll of course get it early and not only get a digital download, but early access to alpha and beta, et cetera, and all the premium things we offer for contributions. But even when the game, for those people who don't, when it finally goes live, it'll still be a digital download. The trial version of the game will be able to be played for free. But as soon as you want to really begin to play the character classes and unlock those skill trees, you'll be expected to pay for the game at what I call a normal price point for a game. And then as we release other episodes, those new episodes would also have a fee. And we might have other points of what I'll call large new areas of content. For example, if we invent a new skill tree like an alchemist, a year and a half from now, there might be a fee to unlock that new area of development of the game. And we think that's fair handshake between us and the players to say, look, if we develop a whole new piece of content, you want access to that whole new piece of content. Of course, you have to support our efforts to provide it.
Do you already know what platform for digital download it will be, like Steam or?
We're just going to do a direct digital download. Hypothetically, we might also put it up on Steam, but we haven't explored that at this point yet. But one of the nice things about digital download is that all you need is a link from where to hit install now, and it should work.
Oh, okay.
And the platforms we're releasing for, by the way, it's first and foremost a PC game, but we're developing in the Unity platform. And one of the brilliant aspects of the Unity platform is not only how powerful it is as a development tool, but also its cross-compiling is very mature. And so it's very easy for us to, alongside the PC version, make available a Mac version and even a Linux version. And then in theory, we can try to cross-compile it to other platforms that it might operate on. And for me as a player, I play about half my personal game playing takes place now on tablets. And so I'm hopeful that we'll still be able to cross-compile it down to a tablet, although the jury is still out, of course, as to how big the graphic footprint becomes, to where we'll see if that remains practical over time.
So Unity means it runs in the browser, right?
No, Unity, we could make it run in the browser by cross-compiling it in Unity in that way. But no, it's just a downloadable executable to run natively on a PC.
Okay, it's a client-based game. So
client-based game.
Okay, excellent. So you mentioned character classes. So there will be a regular character class and not just one hero where you can add skills, whatever you like. So it's the typical way how role-playing games work.
No, actually, the second way you were mentioning is more accurate. So,
really?
When you start the game, one of the things that is very important to me is that you are role playing yourself in this game. You're not playing Conan the Barbarian. You're not playing an evil wizard. This is you who have found your way to my world, to the new world. And so to me, I don't think it's appropriate to make you start over to explore a new character class. And so the way we're doing that is everyone just starts playing. If for your first week, if you're enjoying sword combat, well, then apply your experience to skills associated with sword combat. If in the second week you go, I'd really like to try out the magic system, well, then spend the experience points you get in the second week to learn more about the magic system. Now, those skills are broken up into trees just for convenience of understanding the flow of the education in a particular area. But you, as an individual, can pursue knowledge and skill in any of the areas that we provide.
Cool. So compared to the Ultima games, when is Shroud of the Avatar starting? Is there a common timeline, or is it totally different?
Well, it's technically it's an independent timeline, but what we've done is while Ultima was set in classic medieval fantasy, Shroud of the Avatar we're setting in a slightly further in the future setting. So while the basis of the world is still a classic medieval, introducing a little bit of the mechanical age. So, for example, in the more advanced cities and towns, they've begun to harness forms of power, whether that's hydro power, with a water wheel in the river, whether that's wind from a Dutch windmill-looking device, whether that's geothermal that allows them to run steam into a little boiler. And then with those forms of power, they're actually generating a little bit of electricity. So we have a little electrical force has now started. You'll see that we have these little Tesla tower-like defenses that some of the cities and towns have to protect them from the incursions of evil. And some of the player equipment is beginning to take on some of that edge too. Although the one thing we've opted to leave out of the game is gunpowder. So we don't have guns in the traditional sense created in this new world.
but I noticed this gun icon on the right bottom side. So it was when you attacked someone. It was a gun. We
Yes,
were already wondering what this meant.
exactly. So yeah, so that's a little that's tipping something that's a little further into the game than we probably should have included on that first video. But what that
Okay.
is like I mentioned, there is now electromechanical force that's available. So some of the more unique weapons in the game are going to include things like I don't know if you've seen some. They now make some toys that have these that'll shoot smoke rings by taking a chamber and kind of thumping the back of it with a big opening on the front. It'll make a laminar smoke ring that will travel away.
Okay.
Uh,
You haven't
but in
seen
any case, if you haven't seen those, there's toys that shoot smoke rings now. But if you had a poison gas or a healing gas, a gun that shot smoke rings of that gas would help you target that gas at an opponent that's further away. So we have these kind of gas ring guns that we're bringing in. Another one that we have is because of the electromotive force we have. We have little like magnetic rail guns, these things that use the electricity that has been harnessed to shoot little magnetic rings or pellets, out in front of you, etc. And so that little icon you see down there was for one of the advanced weapons that we were toying with at the time we made that video, which was showing a little sneak peek of one of the more advanced weapons.
Can we have a short break of 10 seconds? Let me just check if it's still recording, because in full view it doesn't show, and I'm very uncertain about this new technology. It would really be a shame. Okay, 21 minutes. Yes, it's still working. Awesome. Switch back to, yes, full view. Okay, so Shroud of the Avatar plays more in the future, so we will not see old friends like Iolo or Shamino from the Ultima games?
You won't see those specific characters because those are part of the trademarks that Electronic Arts acquired when they bought my company Origin.
Mm.
But what's interesting about those people, those characters, is they're patterned after real people. They're my real friends here in Austin, Texas, or who the basis of those are. So I'm hoping to get those real people to come and endorse the new game and the new world, and come and play alongside players here in the future.
Cool. Okay. Can you tell us a bit about the magic system of Shrouds of the Avatar? So in Ultimate played a huge part of the game, and inventing new spells was very difficult. You had to look for new ingredients. So is it kind of similar, or is it totally different?
That's the magic system is probably one of the least documented pieces of the design of the new world. However, to speculate, I'm still very motivated in the way I was in the past to create a magic system that seemed to have, what I call logical reality of things like the words of power that go into it as a backbone, and the reagents that are required to support the creation of those magical spells. So it will likely feel similarly constructed, or similarly motivated. But that's one of the areas we're still working on right now.
Okay, but you won't go into detail, right?
Well, I can't go into detail. There's no detail to offer on that system yet.
Okay. Are there typical role-playing activities as well, like baking bread or marrying an NPC or maybe another player?
Well, the baking bread, absolutely. Marrying, good question. Haven't gotten that. That one hasn't come up very much yet in the design team. But absolutely, one of the things I'm devoted to is, and I even published in my "What is a Lord British Ultimate RPG" kind of treatise that I put up about a year ago, which is that I'm a big believer that in a good role-playing game, as you look around the world, anything that you see that attracts your eye in that it ought to interact, like if you see, oh look, there's a crank. Well, you got to be able to walk over and click on it and turn the crank and see what happens. It shouldn't just be art. It should respond to interaction. And so we're devoted to that in this game also. That anything that you see that looks like it should respond will respond. So if we put a mixing bowl You ought to be able to put water and flour in it and make some dough and pop it in the oven and make some bread. So yes, we do intend for the world to be deeply interactive, as with my previous works.
Cool. So we've seen a few fight scenes or combat scenes, and it's of course real time. So, and if you play with other people, I think there's no pause mode, so it's absolutely real time 1-to-1.
Absolutely real time 1-to-1.
Yeah.
And the combat that you did see though is what I'll call a little more simplified than the final version. We actually have a more sophisticated combat working, but it just wasn't really ready for demonstrating yet. So we turned off, part of the combat user interface.
Yeah.
But the way the final combat is it is neither as simple as just walk around and click on monsters as you go, nor is it the standard MMO one where there's a shortcut bar along the bottom of the screen where you put all your buffs followed by all your best damage over time, and you just kind of before you enter combat, you get all your buffs going, and then you just do your best damage over time items, and as soon as they finish cooling down, press them again. You know what I mean? There's sort of most combat in a lot of role-playing games is fairly brain dead. I would say you're just doing it's really spreadsheet management more than it is thinking about combat. And so what we're trying to do is create a combat system where even before you get into combat, you think about the skills that you have. Like you go through all the possible skills that you might want to use during combat. You preload them into a combat queue, and then during combat, these will kind of fade in and out on your screen as things you might have access to. So you can preload that with either only a couple of things. Like I know for a fact I'm going to want to parry and chop. In case if you only put those two things in your queue, you're very likely to have them available to you at all the time. However, if you're going like, oh, I want to have a more elegant or a more sophisticated set of options, and so I put maybe 10, 15, 20 skills in that queue, well, then that kill shot that you might have had somewhere down the line won't show up very often. And so you'll have to be watching and paying attention to what skills are available to you at any moment of combat as you consider your options. And so we think it'll make a more mentally engaging form of combat for you to have to plan ahead and then pay more attention during gameplay.
Can you give an example for the circumstance when a special ability shows up? So I was wondering, so if a special attack shows up, maybe the enemy must be stunned or something.
That's exactly right. Well, I'll give you a front and an end case. Let's suppose there's one skill which is called a sniper shot. Well, if you're going to take a sniper shot, one is you probably shouldn't be in combat yet. In other words, if you're already engaged in combat, you're not going to be able to be calm and steady and take your time to line it up. Similarly, the opponent probably needs to not be in combat yet. In other words, it needs to be the first shot that either one of you take. And so if that's one that you might want to that you would like to have available, you hope will come up at the very beginning. On the other hand, there might be a finishing blow. And a finishing blow is the opposite extreme. A finishing blow at the beginning probably is useless. And only if it comes up when your opponent, for example, is in the last 10% of his health, is a finishing blow potentially useful. But if that comes up and you see the opponent is in the last 10% of their health, then that would be the perfect opportunity to use that particular one. Mm-hmm. And so you get the idea is that we're going to try to create a number of these tactics that are useful during particular moments and situations. And so when you go into a combat, you'll sit down and go, okay, well, with this group of opponents, I see. In fact, look, if it's a single opponent, my group attacks are probably not very useful. If it's multiple small opponents, my group attacks are probably the most useful. Mm-hmm. And so you preload your queue with or without group attacks based upon whether it's a group. And so that would be a simple description of how you might modify your thinking just before you go into combat.
So combat is already very tactical before you enter the fight, because you have to think of the right setup for the right enemy.
Right, and the way I mentally fictionalize it is you think about real military campaigns. Most military forces, if you're going to go invade a desert country, for example, the military will go out and do desert maneuvers to refresh in the military unit's eyes the proper tactics for the desert. It's not that they haven't trained in desert tactics before, but they've also trained in swamp tactics and open sea bat tactics and forest tactics. But before you go into a desert combat, you think through again desert tactics to make sure that when you're in the desert, they're the ones that come freshly to your mind.
Hmm? Great. Is there any PvP possible?
We do intend to have PvP. We're neither going to the complete extreme that, for example, like we did in Ultima Online, where it's just open PvP. And as much fun as that was to be the PvPer, it was not much fun if you were the newbie trying to get into the game. So it really worked against the community's success over the long haul. But we also don't want to do the completely opt-in version of PvP because we think that that's not as fun either for either party. And so what we're trying to do is do a story-motivated PvP. And so we're actually building points of time in the story where to advance the story, you will want to elect to be open to PvP. For example, you might get a very large reward to run a particularly valuable object from one side of the world to the other, but you'll know that the value of that object is such that other people are going to try to hunt you down and take it, and you will open you up to be in PvP, and we'll tell other people that you're coming to give you a challenge, along the way.
Okay. Good points. So traveling through the country, we've seen the video on the character was always on foot. Will there be any mounts in the game?
In at least our initial release, we don't intend mounts, although over the long haul, we would love to see those come into the game, and that might make a good stretch goal for our public funding campaign. And so once we launch on Friday, we'll go to the people and say, look, do you want this sooner or later? With the initial budget we have, it's really not practical for us to add that in up front. But if that's something that people are really strongly interested in, and if we make some of our stretch goal funding levels with the game, then maybe we can find a way to get it in earlier versus later.
So the Kickstarter campaign starts on Friday at the same time?
Exactly right.
Okay. By the way, talking about mounts, I've seen a dragon flying through the air at one point for a couple of seconds.
Yes.
Will there be mounts as well, or just huge enemies?
Again, in that particular case, that's a huge enemy. So
Okay.
that particular one is not your friend.
Mhm.
That said, we have another map being worked on right now where you at least are taming, some of these creatures to be allies instead of enemies.
Ah,
But whether we make dragons as mounts in the long run, that remains to be seen how we deal with mounts.
but you can have smaller ones as pets and fighting alongside with you.
Again, officially, we've not formally decided to include pets, at least not in the initial release. But again, it's one of those things where pets were super popular in Ultima Online. It makes perfect sense that would be one of the things that we ultimately bring into the game. And again, might make a very good stretch goal that we'll have to talk to the players and go, which would you like for pets, mounts? We'll work with the players to help suss out which things to do first.
And what about flying magic carpets?
That would be similar. To me, that's a mount. So the technology is identical to it's an AI creature that happens to look like a carpet instead of an AI creature that happens to look like a dragon.
I'm sorry, I had just to ask. Okay. The video we've seen, so is it more of an alpha version or more of a beta version of the game?
Which scene?
The video we have seen, is it more an alpha version it's based on or more a beta version?
That's definitely I would call it the prototype version because it's not even an alpha version.
Oh, okay.
So it'll be this fall before we really have what you would call somewhere between an alpha and a beta. And when we get to that alpha or beta state, that's when we'll start letting the players in. And so if people contribute at a sufficient level of the Kickstarter campaign, that is when sometime this fall is when we expect to be able to let them into the game itself.
So did I get you right? So beta maybe this fall. Beta starts this fall. And have you any plans when you will release the game? So maybe spring next year or?
It'll definitely be next year. Spring might be too aggressive. It might be closer to the end of the year for the full release. But that also sort of depends again on this. With the final schedule will depend a great deal on this campaign.
Hmm.
If we reach some of our stretch goals in this campaign, we'll be able to staff up larger to a larger team, and that will allow us to either compress a schedule or add in more features, and we'll work with the players to decide which of those two is more interesting to them.
With the Kickstarter campaign, which goal are you targeting in terms of money?
We're targeting about $1 million. The Kickstarter campaign will be open for about 30 days,
Hmm.
and we have a sister site that's going up at the same time as the Kickstarter, the shroudoftheavatar.com site.
Hmm.
And on that site, it already has all the community bulletin boards and places where we'll begin to start what I call our interactions with the community. And at the close of the Kickstarter, it will also be a place where if people still want to buy into the campaign, they'll be able to either buy the game, buy a lot of the collector's edition components, or otherwise, become part of the community.
Okay, my last question would be, so we've seen, or I had the impression that Britannia was much darker than the Britannia of Ultima in the past, and we have seen this lava field in the mountains, and we've seen this dragon. Is there some kind of cataclysmic event going on? So you mentioned that there was an unknown enemy force destroying cities and areas. So
Yeah. I think you actually saw one of the sieges in the video clips we sent you. These trebuchets firing flaming balls into the downtown of a city.
no.
Wow. Well, then we'll have to get you some screenshots of this too.
Oh,
But yes, I'm a big believer that the bad guys of a story can't just wait for you to come kill them in the final level. They really need to be in the world doing things. And so we already have an example of one of the towns under siege. And let's suppose you lived in that town. So if the town that you have a house is under siege, that would mean that the retail shops in that town were not available during the siege because all the NPCs are running around, screaming. That would mean that the quests that you might want to start or finish in that city would not be available because those NPCs again are running around. That would mean if you had a house in that town, it would probably not be available because the doors would be locked and the roof may be on fire, and so you would actually have to resolve the battle that's going on in that town before you could even go back to your own house to drop off things you'd already earned on a recent quest or pick up new equipment you might want to go out on a new quest with, and so those bad guys, the new rise of evil, is absolutely systematically going from town to town, not just killing people because they're evil, but they're actually looking for something, and so they have a very specific plan, and that is the first mystery that you're here to uncover in Forsaken Virtues, the first episode of Shroud of the Avatar.
thank you. So this is a huge appetizer for us, and we are really looking forward to see the better in fall. We cross the fingers that your target of $1 million will be reached, and thank you a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. See ya.
See
And
ya.
by the way, too, just for you personally, your readers there in Germany are hugely important to not just our campaign, but just our long-term success. I mean, my previous work in Ultimas, Germany was by far the #1 country in Europe for them, and commonly rivaled the United States, with its importance. And so anything I can do for you to support the community there, I'm very motivated to do. So if after this campaign goes live, if you have readers and viewers that have other questions, or you would like to circle back, we'll discuss more detail about magic or combat or whatever it is they would like to talk about, or you would like to talk about, please contact David, and let's set up another time to circle back and do this again.
That's great, because so maybe in an hour or something you said, man, I should have asked this questions, or when you do the script and the writing, there's always a follow-up question which comes up.
Happy to do it. Let's get back together anytime.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you. You too.